Okay, let's just dive right into this. Behind every single pill you take or every medical treatment you receive, there's this fascinating, highly complex web of risk, data, and accountability. Today's explainer is going to show you exactly how pharmaceutical and biotech companies actually measure, track, and report their safety records. We're going to look under the hood at the specific metrics that separate a safe product from a literal public health crisis.
To do this, we're looking directly at the SASB standards, specifically the Biotechnology and Pharmaceuticals Industry Standard. This is now overseen by the International Sustainability Standards Board, but really, you can just think of this document as the industry's ultimate report card. It dictates exactly how these massive global companies must quantify and disclose their corporate accountability, especially when we're talking about patient safety.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Overseeing clinical trials. 2. Tracking product fatalities. 3. The reality of recalls. 4. Managing product disposal. And 5. The bottom line.
All right, starting with Section 1, overseeing clinical trials, the pre-market phase.
Now, it's absolutely crucial to clearly define what a clinical trial actually is. According to the World Health Organization, it's basically any research study that assigns human participants to health-related interventions to evaluate outcomes. Simple enough, right? But here's the catch. These human interventions are very often handled by third-party contract research organizations, or CROs. And when a pharma company outsources these trials, well, they don't get to outsource the responsibility. It requires massive, fully documented oversight.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer global scale of that oversight. To ensure quality, the standards require companies to explicitly detail their management processes for these CROs across 5 specific global regions: North America, Central and Latin America, Europe, Asia including the Middle East, and Africa. We're talking about spelling out the types of procedures they follow, how often they run audits, and what their enforcement mechanisms look like, everywhere they operate.
But the most impactful number in this entire pre-market phase is metric HCBP 210A.2. Rather than just vaguely tracking how many inspections happen, this metric isolates the actual trouble spots. It demands that companies disclose exactly how many regulatory inspections uncovered objectionable conditions. And we mean conditions so severe they force the company to either voluntarily fix the issue or face regulatory and administrative penalties. Basically, it cuts right through the corporate fluff and shows us exactly where clinical trial practices fail to hit the mark.
Moving on to Section 2, tracking product fatalities, post-market safety.
So that begs the question, right? What actually happens when things go wrong after a drug gets approved? The harsh reality is that highly important safety information is very often discovered long after those tightly controlled clinical trials end. Real-world usage out in the wild can reveal severe adverse events that expose companies to significant financial and, far more importantly, human implications.
When you're reading through a pharma company's safety dashboard, the pacing really slows down for this stark and sobering metric. Under code HCBP 250A.2, companies have to disclose the total number of fatalities associated with all the products they manufacture. They track this using major adverse event databases, like the WHO's VIGI-base, for instance. And this isn't some fuzzy percentage or ratio. It is a hard, absolute number of lives lost linked to their products during that reporting period. It's incredibly heavy stuff.
Which brings us to Section 3, the reality of recalls, removing products from the market.
When things do go wrong, the SASB standards force companies to provide a complete, clear picture of a recall by requiring a distinct comparison. First, they look at the frequency of the event, so the actual number of recalls issued. Second, they look at the sheer scale of the event, which is measured by the total units recalled. Think about it. Having 10 separate recalls of 100 units each paints a vastly different risk profile than having just one recall, but of 10 million units. Scale matters.
Now, to fully grasp the business risk behind these safety failures, companies can also contextualize these recalls financially. The standards actually allow them to optionally report the specific recalled product's revenue from the trailing 12 months prior to the recall. This is fascinating because it brilliantly connects patient safety directly to shareholder value. It proves that a failure in quality control is, at the end of the day, a fundamental failure in business management.
Let's look at Section 4, managing product disposal. End-of-life logistics.
You see, safety doesn't just suddenly end when a patient gets better or a prescription runs out. We're talking about a massive logistical undertaking here. Metric HC-BP 250A.4 requires companies to report the weight of products accepted for take-back, reuse, or disposal, and the unit of measurement here tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the scale.
They measure this in metric tons. We're talking literal tons of pharmaceutical products being reclaimed from end consumers and medical facilities every single year. So, the really crucial point to take away here is that this isn't just basic waste management. When a company collects metric tons of disposed products, it represents a highly targeted, systemic effort to protect the public. By getting these excess drugs off the street, they're actively working to stop black market sales, prevent pharmaceutical product abuse, and, this is a big one, keep active, highly potent chemical compounds from being released into our local water supplies and environment.
And finally, Section 5, the bottom line, corporate accountability.
By tracking these specific data points, the SASB standards give us what is essentially a true pharma safety dashboard. We can trace the entire life cycle, from pre-market clinical trial oversight and inspections, through the post-market tracking of fatalities and adverse events, over to the sheer scale and frequency of product safety recalls, all the way down to the metric tons of proper end-of-life drug disposal. This framework takes what is normally really dense, localized corporate reporting and transforms it into a clear, transparent, and globally standardized picture of human impact.
As you digest all these metrics, it really leaves us with one vital, final question to think about. Now that we know exactly how pharmaceutical risk and patient safety are measured, from the laboratory all the way to the disposal bin, are we paying close enough attention to these dials on the dashboard? Are we, as consumers and investors, demanding enough transparency to ensure that the medicine we trust is truly safe?